can't do it, we'll do it live.
Okay. No.
We'll do it live. Fuck it. Do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live. Fucking thing sucks.
5, 4, 3.
Watching my life passing right in front of my eyes. Hello, the story.
Hello. Welcome to Open Wide for some soccer. My name is Seth Vertelny. With me this evening, Pablo Maurer, Thomas Floyd. It's been a little while. We're back.
It's been a month.
It's been a month.
It's been a month.
I missed you guys.
Pablo?
I don't know if you missed me.
I've just been too busy to miss anybody, I think.
That's a cop-out if I've ever heard one.
Basically, yeah.
It still hurts.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Apologies to our loyal dozen or so listeners.
There are eight of you out there right now.
Yes, we know that we have been pretty non-existent recently. I think it's safe to say. We are having a few minor issues with our transition away from our former home, backheel.com, and setting up our new RSS feed. Currently, we're still just on YouTube, but we are going to be setting up a new RSS feed in the very near future, and that should be up and running in about a week or so. Pablo
Has nodded.
He gave a sort of a shrug, but I'm going to take that as a yes. That's what he was telling me before the show, so.
Well, I'm excited about it.
Yeah. I can't wait. So, since we last did our show, some things have happened. Few games in the world of American soccer involving the USMNT. They began a tournament. They went through in this tournament. They lost in this tournament, and then the tournament ended yesterday. So
Sizzling description of the action there.
What I'm saying is the entire tournament happened while we have yet to do a show on it.
Best laid plans too. We're gonna do like one a week, or like multiple ones a week, or have Thomas call in from any of the like 30 games he was at. You know.
Yeah, Thomas
was at 8 games.
How many games did you go? You went to 8 games.
8 games, yeah.
Which is exactly 8 more games than Pablo and I went to.
What was the best and the worst game you went to?
The best game, I would say. I mean, the final it wasn't the prettiest game, but it was the most dramatic, and there was certainly a lot of entertainment value to it. You had red cards, you had an insane referee, you had a lot of harsh challenges, and
So it's like 6-7 different games I saw in this tournament could be described that way.
Yeah. So, Thomas, describe how you learned about Messi's quote-unquote retirement and how that all went down in the media corps, because I can imagine that everybody just sort of had a collective shit fit once that news came down.
Yeah, it apparently was stated in one of the broadcast interviews first, so it wasn't in the mix zone. It wasn't something that the print media got first access to. So I was in the press box already writing my story, and then you just kind of hear one person like, Messi say he's retiring? And everyone kind of looks down to their laptop like, that can't be right. Now here's another guy saying that Messi says he's retiring.
Everybody
from international
sprints towards anybody who can speak Spanish, basically.
And then eventually the Argentine FA, their official account, tweeted out a quote.
I was shocked that they did that, by the way.
And
they were almost eager to do that.
And then they tweeted out a quote from Romero that basically contradicted it, where he was like, yeah, I don't think Messi's really being serious. He's just being emotional. So thanks, Argentine FA, for no clarity whatsoever.
You know how Jose Mourinho comes to mind as the master of this, but other managers do it too. When their team has had a horrible performance, in the post-game interview, they'll often say something outrageous or outlandish to basically get the attention off of the team and onto what they have said. Sort of a master diversionary tactic. You wonder, Messi, when the narrative was all set to be Messi and Argentina blow it again, now all of a sudden the narrative is, Lionel, don't go, please,
Right.
please.
Also, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but Chile won the Copa America.
Literally nobody cares. Literally
They
nobody
won
cares.
back-to-back Copa Americas after having never won it before.
Hey, good for them. You know what? They also beat Mexico 7-0.
Yeah, they're a pretty good team.
They are. But
That was exceptional to watch, by the way.
I think even if Messi hadn't have announced his retirement after the game, the focus would not have been on Chile. But that just made sure that there was absolutely zero focus on Chile.
Poor Chile. You know, I just want the record to show that I wrote a Claudio Bravo column after the game. I really wanted to chase down the big
Okay, well,
storylines
and
that people are
the-
talking about.
In the annals of time, you'll be remembered as one of the good ones that wrote a Claudio Bravo story after the game.
Yeah, how about-
let's talk about the U.S. national team.
Hold on, I have one more point on Claudio Bravo.
Here we go.
So Thomas actually reminded me of this after he was named the Golden Glove, the best goalkeeper of the tournament.
And best 11.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was in that all Chile Argentina tournament best 11.
Which was incredible.
Yeah, this is worth discussion. I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah. But yeah, I just found it hilarious because he had how many? At least 2 just complete howlers in the group stage. Almost cost them several games, but luckily they had Alexis Sanchez and Eduardo Vargas among other players who were there to just score tons of goals and pick up the slack for him.
Yeah, in the group stage against Panama, which is one of the random games I covered, he allowed 2 complete howlers. And then against Argentina, he allowed 2 near post goals that neither one was, a howler, but they were both like, oh, he should have saved that.
Yeah.
And no one remembers that. Apparently, he's still the keeper of the tournament anyway, even though Ospina on Colombia didn't put a foot wrong the whole tournament, made a bunch of really impressive saves, like 2 on identical Clint Dempsey free kicks in the opener in the third place game. I mean, I don't know. The fact that the entire team was only Argentina and Chile makes me pretty sure the committee only watched the final and ignored the rest of the tournament.
I mean, that's insane.
Yeah, to interject real quick, obviously we'd love your calls all night, 708-LT-OWFSS. Going to get into the U.S. national team here in a minute. I know that you guys have some thoughts. Feel free to call in and commiserate, whatever you want. Pro-Jurgen, anti-Jurgen, only anti-Wondolowski, please.
Poor Wando.
I know.
I
know,
feel
I know.
legitimately bad for Wando.
So do I, man. So do I.
Nicest guy in MLS.
Ever since he walked by that empty room at the All-Star game, where his agent was like, would anybody like to talk to Chris Wondolowski? And he just sort of like happily nod and continue walking.
He was just sitting in an empty room, like on his phone, looking bored, and it's like they had him chained in there, waiting for someone to want to interview him.
Yeah, I remember it was some sort of a promotional thing, right,
Yeah.
with
Castrol,
Castrol. Yes.
Oh, poor Wando.
Poor Wando. We'll get into that. Yeah. So let's just get into it with the national team. Let's do a little recap for those who forgot the tournament. They lost to Colombia.
Pablo with the unintentional mic drop.
Mic drop. You should do that after you make a good point normally, but so yeah, they lose Colombia, beat Costa Rica, beat Paraguay, get past Ecuador in the quarterfinal, get demolished by Argentina in the semifinal, and then lose to Colombia in the third place game. I guess the big overlying question with this U.S. national team performance in the Copa America, was this tournament a success?
Yeah, I mean it's undoubtedly a success, right? It's a 4th place finish out of 16 teams in a major, international competition. I mean, depends how you define success, but on the surface, I mean,
I don't necessarily disagree, but also I think there is there is room to dissect this.
We will.
I think for it to be a successful tournament, they needed to have at least one marquee win, and they didn't have a single win that they weren't expected to get. They basically lucked into this situation where they got a very winnable quarterfinal on home soil against Ecuador. Even if they had been the group runner-up, it would have been Peru. Basically, they benefited from Brazil shitting the bed in the other group and bringing a weakened team. And so they got to the semifinals, but what result was particularly impressive in this tournament?
Well, so Seth and I have both on Twitter, I think, made the identical point, which is that what I learned from this tournament, what we learned, is that the U.S. are exactly who we thought they were. They won their winnable games. They didn't do anything special in the ones that weren't winnable. They didn't look particularly dominant in any game other than obviously stretches of the Costa Rica game. I don't think I really learned anything about the U.S. this tournament.
I think we learned that they actually haven't made as much progress as maybe you would like to think, and that's really just zeroing in on the Colombia opener and the Argentina game. The fact that they just got annihilated against Argentina and didn't put up a fight at all. I mean, this is, it's a very tough opponent, but a Bruce Arena-led U.S.
There are ways to manage that game.
Yeah, I mean, 2006 World Cup, U.S. ties a not great U.S. team managed to tie Italy, who won the World Cup.
I mean, we'll get into this more
US
later,
beat
but
Spain. It's possible.
It's certainly I think you could make a very strong argument that that Jurgen didn't set them up to succeed in that game. I mean, I said, I think there are ways to manage that game. It's not. No team really should go into any game thinking, there's literally no way we're going to beat this team. Let's minimize damage. And there's a way to beat every team.
We'll get in the Argentina game, but I do think that we do have to give them credit. I don't think it's completely fair to the U.S. and Klinsmann to brush aside victories against Costa Rica, a very convincing victory against Costa Rica. Of course, this is not as good of a Costa Rica team as made it to the quarterfinals in the World Cup 2 years ago, but a 4-0 win against Costa Rica is an impressive win.
You're talking about a team that's barely ever – have they ever beaten the U.S. In the United States? No, I don't believe so.
And, they were missing Keylor Navas, missing Giancarlo Gonzalez.
I mean, I understand what you're saying, but, you're right. We shouldn't brush over it, but at the same time – You can't make too much of that game,
Yeah, okay, well, fair enough. But I think, the win against Paraguay was impressive in the fact that they had to do it shorthanded for almost an entire half of the game.
Yeah.
A gritty kind of quote-unquote American type performance where they all sort of banded together. And then
I'm sure Ben Olsen was crying during the entire second half.
And probably the most impressive win was against Ecuador. This is a team that is doing very, very well in South American qualifying. They managed to tie Brazil, should have won. They had a goal that was ruled out wrongly, as it turned out. So, yes, I wouldn't say it was a smashing, successful tournament, but, making it to the semifinal and getting 3 wins, 2 of which came against South American opposition, it's impressive for the U.S., and, they should be happy with the overall performance in the tournament.
I agree. We can agree on that, right?
I think
their goal was to make the semis. They made the semis,
and they won the group.
And they looked okay against Colombia in the third place game. I think they hit the bar twice.
They weren't bad against Colombia in the opening game either. It was fairly even. They didn't create a whole lot attacking wise.
All right, Jurgen, calm down.
Well, when you statistically, it was a pretty even game. Of course, Colombia getting that goal within the first 10 minutes allowed them to sort of sit back and invite the U.S., and they weren't able to really break them down in any way. But, it wasn't like they got dominated.
They've done a tremendous job
in that game.
So here's the part of it that makes me a little more skeptical of the success narrative. Did the U.S. progress in terms of individual players growing? Did the U.S. progress in terms of an overarching philosophy? I think entering this tournament, there was a lot of optimism that they'd be playing this more proactive, possession-oriented 4-3-3 system that was pretty quickly discarded in favor of the same 4-4-2, 4-2-3-1 they've played for years. Guys who Klinsmann himself identified as being potential breakout players, specifically Darlington Nagbe and Christian Pulisic, weren't given the opportunities to really grow. And a big thing Klinsmann kept saying was this is such a learning experience, that this will be so important going forward in the qualifying into the next World Cup. Well, I mean, a lot of this team, how much longer, is Jermaine Jones going to be around? Clint Dempsey, did they really need learning experiences? Sure, it was big for Bobby Wood and John Brooks and Jossie Zardes, but it would have been even bigger for Darlington Nagbe and Christian Pulisic to get opportunities in these games. And I think there's a real argument to be made that they also would have made the team better. This isn't just throwing youth in for the sake of youth.
Yeah, I also I got to mention, I mean, there were stretches, well, basically for that entire Argentina game and stretches of the first Colombia game where I thought to myself, wow, I mean, not only has the team not progressed, here I am sitting and just watching this like empty bucket, lump the ball forward bullshit that has always been against. And that's the one constant for me of the Klinsmann-led U.S. sides playing meaningful games against top-tier opponents. It always devolves into that, and it's some games like the Argentina game, it happens within 10 minutes.
Absolutely. And also the choices he made in that game with the 3 suspensions, I thought said a lot about his willingness to really build this roster. He went back to 3 World Cup veterans who are in their late 20s to early 30s with Graham Zusi, Chris Wondolowski, and Kyle Beckerman. And there's a real argument to be made, particularly, I think, with Wondolowski and also Beckerman, that they would have been better served going to some of the younger options they had to fill those holes. You know, bringing Nagbe into the fold, even though it wasn't a like-for-like swap for Wood, would have made the U.S. play a more proactive style, I think, and would have given him such an incredible big game experience. You know, Kyle Beckerman and Chris Wondolowski may never play another game for the national team. I don't think that would surprise either of you. Was that a learning experience for them? You know,
never say never with Wando, by the way. It's just not,
I tweeted this during the game, but so many times I feel like people have been ready to declare Wando's U.S. MNT career over, only for him to come back like a zombie a few months later.
By the way, this is not a referendum on whether somebody like a player like Chris Wondolowski or Brad Davis, for example, is good in MLS or is a good human being. It's just insane to me that at this level, at this point in time, somebody like Wando would get a start.
Also,
an elimination game, and the biggest tournament the U.S. has played since the World Cup, probably. I mean,
also a couple of stats with Wando that I feel like are just incredible. He has still never played a single World Cup qualifying game. Like, he is a guy.
Really? That's amazing.
He is a guy who just is basically on the fringes of the roster, perpetually. And then when it comes time,
Thomas Floyd.
Oh, sorry, that's a pretty impressive statistic. I didn't know.
Yeah, I just noticed it because U.S. Soccer, when they send out their press releases for qualifying rosters, they include qualifying caps, and next to Wando was a big old 0. And so
fatality.
And then also Wondolowski, over the last year, since the 3rd place game of the Gold Cup, which he started, he had played 30 minutes for the U.S. national team until the Argentina game. And then he started a Copa America semifinal against the world's #1 ranked team. I mean, it doesn't matter who it is. I don't, the age of the player or his resume or whatever. A player who just has no experience playing on that level in recent memory, no real rhythm with his teammates, shouldn't be in the lineup in that situation.
Well, why don't we broaden this out a little bit instead of talking about individual games and talk about just players who we think excelled or may have hurt their chances, decreased their stock, the tournament as a whole. Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the first obvious one is John Brooks. It's amazing.
He did have a rough go against Argentina, but I mean everybody did.
Yeah. It's amazing the difference a summer makes with him because, as we all recall fondly, the Brooks Ventura Alvarado partnership in last summer's Gold Cup was a disaster. And you start to think now, maybe it actually had something to do with the fact that Ventura Alvarado is a disaster, and John Brooks. I mean, I'm not going to discount the importance of him having a good season with Hertha this year, but he's always had the ability, and he really started to show that he's the U.S.'s best center back in this tournament, and we haven't seen that from him. It's been more up and down, which of course is really encouraging for national team fans because he's still so young. He's only 23, and along with Cameron, it looks like, I mean, that is the center back pairing that's going to take the U.S. through qualifying and into the next World Cup. Next one we have Bobby Wood.
Yeah, undoubtedly. I think it was obviously a massive loss.
When he was suspended for the semi.
Yeah. But undoubtedly, I think he, to me, I'm curious to get you guys' thoughts on this. For me, he's their number one now.
I think he has to be. Yeah.
I think Altidore has to earn that spot back, and I think that Josie is when he's on his game, he's great, strong, but he can't really stretch defenses in the way that Wood does.
Wood, I think, is a more complete striker at this point.
Agreed.
Yeah. And a healthier striker.
Yeah. I mean, Altidore missing another tournament with the hamstring injury. One time's an accident, 2 times a trend.
What does that do to his confidence? I'm just kidding. Confidence.
Yeah, but you wonder, when Altidore's back healthy, how Jurgen would potentially try to fit in Altidore, Wood, and Dempsey into the same lineup.
I'm going to start a Twitter parody account just called Josie Altidore's Confidence. Just daily updates.
I'm sure he'd enjoy that.
Right.
Yeah. But it's kind of interesting, at least when it comes to Altidore, is like this next World Cup. As far as the age that he is, like, it should be his World Cup. I mean, this is it. He's been a pro for almost 10 years. He will be at that point. Like, he should be right in his prime. But it's hard to count on him. And Wood has really stepped up and taken advantage of his absence, and as well as Aaron Johansson, who, if he hadn't kept having these recurring hip nerve injury issues, probably would have been right there to start in Altidore's place ahead of Wood in this tournament, considering he moved to the Bundesliga and started off the season fairly well.
Is it fair to say, it's strange we're talking about this before the show, is it fair to say Jermaine Jones increased his stock?
I think so. Going into this tournament, there were questions about his long-term future with the national team because he hadn't really played any big games for them since the World Cup. He missed the Gold Cup through injury, played the first couple qualifiers in the fall, then was suspended for the big qualifiers this past March. So it was easy to kind of forget about Jermaine Jones in terms of the national team picture and what role he would play. But, it's starting to look increasingly feasible that 36-year-old Jermaine Jones will, in fact, make it to the next World Cup. I mean, what role he plays, who knows if he's starting? That seems like it would be problematic, but I think in this tournament we saw that he's a guy capable of probably being a squad player at least when 2018 rolls around.
I think his role will be the guy who gets the extremely costly red card.
Of course, yeah. Maybe like you burn a very valuable sub on him in the 64th minute, and then he gets a very painful red card 3 minutes later. He's dynamic like that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Cost you subs and then cost you players in the field.
That, for the record, was the first red card of his national team career.
Jesus. Thomas dropping the knowledge tonight.
He has a shockingly small number of red cards.
Question from the audience from Darren Driscoll wants to know if Bobby Wood's temper is a concern going forward. I got to say, that was an incredibly stupid... I'm thinking of...
his first
Orozco's. No, I'm thinking...
Oh, yeah.
That was like the dumbest red card I've ever seen in my life.
I'm sorry. I just thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, he gave us a good gif, right? At least, like...
It was in like the 89th minute of a game that didn't really matter to begin with, and was wrapping up. Even if they tied it, it would go straight to PKs. Like, if you're going to get a red card for just shoving a dude in the face, like, that is the right time to do it. Like, that was the most sound decision Michael Orozco has made on the national team level.
Not to get sidetracked, but somebody also, John Hoffman asks, over on Jalen Robinson's next DC United start. I'll set the line at next year's U.S. Open Cup.
I thought you were going to say next U.S. national team cast.
I just want to say for the record, we were talking about that before the show.
Yeah, pre-show, I think Seth said 2019.
I said 3 years. Yeah. We'll see him again.
To go on a little tangent.
Please, Thomas, go on a tangent.
To me, it's amazing that DC United's new signing, Chris Durkin, who is the U.S. U17 captain. I don't know if you guys read the press release that closely. Like, he debuted for DC, by all accounts, played extremely well in their Open Cup loss to Fort Lauderdale. He went out.
By the way, probably like one of the better passing performances I've seen
And it,
out of a DCN
Yeah,
midfielder in years.
16 years old,
Yeah.
and now he will train with DC the rest of the summer and then leave the club for over a year.
Yeah.
Like, he will not return until after the 2017 U17 World Cup, which is in September or October, I think. So
This has investment written all over
They're-
it. When I
yeah.
say investment, I mean like they'll get money for him, not like they'll,
Yeah, and you know, during his absence, he will get the same amount of playing time with DC United that he would have if he actually stayed with the team. So,
yeah, it's funny though. He seems like the type of guy who actually might convince Benny to throw him minutes, and then he's taken away from the team for this whole situation.
What about Brad Guzan, by the way?
yeah,
Circle
we
back
have
on
him
this.
as a player who increased their stock. I think by all accounts, he was having an excellent tournament up until the Argentina game. But I still maintain that he is a player who increased his stock. I think he was vital for the U.S. and without his saves, particularly against Paraguay, they might not have even gotten as far as they did. And it was a big vote of confidence for Klinsmann to give Guzan that starting role on a full-time basis ahead of Howard heading into the tournament. And based on the way that Guzan played in the tournament, I don't see any reason why Howard would be able to regain his starting spot moving forward into the World Cup qualifiers.
I think this is Guzan's spot, barring some sort of troubles on the club level, which we'll see what happens. Right now, I believe he's essentially a free agent. All assumptions are that he's going to leave Aston Villa, who just got relegated, so we'll see where he lands.
Well, there's chatter about him coming down MLS. I mean,
Right, yeah, Chicago guy, so they could maybe use a goalkeeper. But yeah,
now that Sean Johnson was exiled into the outer reaches of outer space by Jurgen Klinsmann.
Sean Johnson's career over.
It's a real shame that his career is over. Jurgen, he's still playing.
but yeah, it's I'm more intrigued by at this point who is going to continue to back up Guzan. Will it be Howard? Will Howard accept that role? The fact that he's based in the U.S. now, playing in MLS, might make it easier. It won't be as much travel to sit on the bench for qualifiers. But also, you have to look at the young guys. Ethan Horvath was the third stringer in this tournament. I'm fascinated by this Bill Hamid topic, where Klinsmann
he's the
has...
best. I think he's their best keeper.
Yeah, and Klinsmann has now on multiple occasions come out and criticized Hamid, saying that he hasn't progressed the way he wanted to, that I think in the most recent interview he went as far as to basically allude to Hamid disappearing from the picture. That it's like he's not even on the radar right now. So
You never
I think
know with
that's
Klinsmann.
very harsh.
He
yeah.
might just be saying that to light a fire under someone's ass.
Of course, I think that's a big part of it, yeah.
Let's talk about people whose stock dropped. We already touched on Wando, and for the sake of not driving this man to suicide, I think we just move on
Yes.
to the other standout, or the other low light. Kind of a shocker, although I shouldn't say it's a shocker because he's sort of been off for like the past 6 months, Michael Bradley. In MLS in particular, you see him making careless passes through midfield that the guy has never made in his entire career.
Yeah, the interesting thing with Bradley is heading into the tournament, there was so much optimism around him because, with that 4-3-3 that they headed into the tournament with, everyone was like, all right, this is it. Bradley's been playing more of a 6 in MLS, and now he's finally playing that position with the national team, which we've been clamoring for so long. And look at what happened. First of all, he didn't play that position the whole tournament, but
He played that position for about 1 1/3 of a game, and then they moved on.
right. But particularly against Argentina, I thought he was awful, and this seems to be a theme with him over the years, where in big moments he doesn't perform to the level that we would expect out of Michael Bradley that we've seen over the years. And it's in a game like that where you need Bradley, who is one of your best players objectively, to play like that. He was one of their worst players and just seemed completely overrun by the Argentina pressure.
It pains me to say this a little bit because I enjoy seeing national team players come back to MLS and grow that league, but Bradley's performances in the big games, I think, have had a direct correlation with him returning to MLS.
Well, now he's connected with a move back to Italy, right?
Right,
I
and,
mean,
and maybe that's what he needs right now.
I
Because
completely agree.
It really started around the 2014 World Cup. I think that was the first time he had a string of performances where you were like, man, Bradley is struggling. Like even before that, 2010 World Cup, 29 Confederations Cup, he always stepped up to the level he was playing against. And now it seems like when he goes up against the top teams in the world, he's a step behind, that he doesn't have the time on the ball he's used to in MLS. He has tighter spaces to work with. And to me, it could be as simple as a rhythm thing. The fact that he's playing against what we have to say is inferior opposition. They would be if he were still in Serie A. I think that has hindered him a little bit, and he lacks the rhythm on the ball that he had when playing against these top teams previously when he was based in Europe.
Well, the interesting thing is, with Bradley, it does seem like there's a correlation between his move to MLS and his level of play with the U.S. dropping. On the other hand, you have a guy like Clint Dempsey, and he moved to MLS around the same time, and he hasn't missed a beat with the U.S. In fact,
Jermaine Jones as well.
Yeah, he seems to have
I don't
gotten.
know. Maybe it comes down to a personality thing. I think there are guys who I think it's possible to exist in MLS and perform at a higher level than everyone around you. Look at Jovinko, something like that. But maybe, speculating here, maybe Michael is a player who needs that pressure around him, needs people doubting him,
Yeah, and
I mean that's certainly lacking in this league.
Yeah, and Thomas, you made a great point, because it did seem like those particular situations in the Argentina game, when Argentina was really coming at him with pressure, like that was when he struggled the most. That's when he just didn't seem like he had the speed of thought that he needed to really keep the ball, and he looked a half step slow the entire game.
Yeah, and it's it's something to bring this back to MLS. He even struggled last year in the game against the Red Bulls, who are well known for their high press, and you do start to wonder when he's put in these pressure situations whether he has the speed of thought at this particular moment with the level of play he's used to going up against in MLS to deal with those situations.
Right. So we touched on this a little bit before, but I wanted to get into it a bit more. The two guys that U.S. fans and media were really excited about, especially based on their performances in the friendlies leading up to the Copa America, which some have generously referred to as a young duo. One of them certainly is. The other one is about to turn 26, so I don't know if that's actually accurate, but
he's just new.
Yeah, right. More new than young. Darlington Abbey, Christian Pulisic. They just didn't really get much of a shot in this tournament. Pulisic, I believe, he was brought off the bench against Colombia and then wasn't seen until the second half of the Argentina game.
Same with Nagby.
Same with Nagby. Do you think this is a situation where U.S. fans have a right to be upset that the Klinsmann didn't give them more of a chance, or was it a situation where after the Colombia game, the U.S. got on a little bit of a run, they were winning some games, so you don't necessarily want to change the lineup? He actually kept the lineup the same, which has been a complete rarity for Klinsmann, and maybe it just wasn't time for Nagby and Pulisic yet.
I will say, to play devil's advocate here, situationally, it wasn't the best circumstances in the second and third group games in the knockout game against Ecuador to bring them in. Against Costa Rica, I think he just wanted to get Beckerman and Wando some minutes so they'd have a rhythm in case he needed them. It was a blowout game, garbage time, whatever. Then they go down a man against Paraguay, so you don't really need attacking subs in that situation. Makes sense. You want to turn to some veterans. Same thing against Ecuador, protecting a lead. So in that regard, you can see the logic why they didn't play that much. That said, I just think, particularly Nagby, Pulisic, I get to an extent. He's young, he's raw. You don't want to overextend him too quickly. But Nagby's a guy who he's about to about to turn 26.
Yes,
and his window is already closing because the citizenship process took so long, and He's a guy who now has been in the national team picture. He's been eligible since last September, October, debuted in November. I think it's overdue for them to have implemented him. And I think it is a small failure of this tournament that they didn't get him the minutes, the big game experience, the chemistry building matches that he needed to become the type of player that I think he's capable of being with the U.S., which is a real marquee player for them.
I want to make a broader point too, and that's that I think that Klinsmann's lineup changes have been bafflingly conservative sometimes, and I think it's interesting because you figure a guy on a guaranteed contract would maybe be a little bit more adventurous, maybe be willing to take more risks. I think that's why you give a coach a 4-year contract extension in the middle of his contract, is because you have that sort of faith. And I'm just regularly puzzled, by his refusal to sort of take those chances.
Well, when you talk about the guaranteed contract, it's kind of interesting because let's go back to before the Costa Rica game. And you had Sunil Gulati making some public comments that were very out of character, with what we've heard from him, which sort of seemed to indicate.
Did it again today, didn't he?
I might have missed that.
I did not see that.
But he sort of seemed to indicate that if Costa Rica beat the U.S. in that game and the U.S. didn't get out of the group, that Klinsmann's job could be under threat, which who knows if it was just a motivational tactic, if he actually meant it. But it was interesting to hear something like that when the assumption has long been that one of two things is going to happen in this World Cup qualifying cycle. Either the U.S. is going to the World Cup with Jurgen Klinsmann, or they are going to watch the World Cup on TV and begin the next cycle with a new coach. So that was pretty shocking to hear.
Yeah, it's, in that context, I agree it was a bit of a change of pace, but also it made sense if the U.S. had crashed out of this, tournament that they've built, that their coach has built as this big event on home soil, crashed out, in that specific circumstance, they would have been the first team eliminated. Then you have a 3-month gap between World Cup qualifiers. That actually would have seemed like the right time to make a change. So, speaking hypothetically, I can see why Gulati went in that direction, but also don't know if there are huge takeaways you can glean from those quotes from him, just because it seems so in line with what would be logical if that situation played out. But we also knew it was a fairly unlikely scenario that they would have lost to Costa Rica at home in that game.
Right. So yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the World Cup qualifying because this tournament has been it's been fun. They've had some success. They've taken however you want to look at it, at least a small step forward. But there are still some real actual issues coming up in these games that will be in the fall. They're not in the Hex yet, and the reason that they're not in the Hex yet is because they haven't had a very good semifinal round of qualifying. Of course, they lost to Guatemala, which was unprecedented, historic, and the Copa America was a nice diversion, but it's almost, I almost get the sense that now, after they take a break for a month or two, it's almost like back to reality. They really have some big games coming up in the fall.
I mean, they don't have anything on the schedule till the end of September, right? Till qualifying.
Well, the beginning of September, but yeah.
Okay.
They actually FIFA eliminated the August date, so yeah, no games until then. The thing that also, correct me if I'm wrong,
I won't be able to do that. But
neither will I.
The Hex begins this year. Like, this is a new schedule for World Cup qualifying that we haven't seen before, brought on by the elimination of some dates and the Copa America.
Really?
I believe the Hex starts in November, so this will be, these games coming up are big games, but also they should qualify comfortably. They've got Trinidad and Tobago at home, at St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Those are two of the easiest games of this entire phase, and even if they, I think get a win and a draw, they should still comfortably go through. But the start of the semifinal round, or the start of the Hex, that's when things really get serious. and that's when, if you're a U.S. fan, you want to see the progress really pay off. So that's
Wow, you're right.
Yeah, November
7th through the 15th.
Yeah,
and
so
then the
right in the middle of the MLS playoffs.
I mean, that's crazy. 7th through the 15th of November, and then all the way to March.
Yeah, because they eliminated the single FIFA dates that were in August and February. So
Right.
once they had to move everything up a few months to accommodate.
Crazy.
So yeah, one more point on this tournament. I think before we do a little Jurgen debate, because I know we've been wanting to get into that. Clint Dempsey once again led the U.S. in scoring in a major tournament, and I think that especially after this tournament, he really has made a case to be considered the best American player ever. He has led the U.S. in scoring in 6 major tournaments: the 06 World Cup, the 09 Confederations Cup, 11 Gold Cup, and then the last 3 summers, the 14 World Cup, 15 Gold Cup, and now the Copa America this summer.
I will take a small objection with referring to the Gold Cup as a major tournament.
Okay, well, big
No, I
tournament.
mean, it's as big as it gets for the U.S. typically.
Big tournament for the U.S.
Right.
When Landon Donovan retired a couple of years back, and of course his U.S. retirement was a forced retirement, but when he retired, he was sort of referred to as the greatest American player of all time. And since that time, Clint Dempsey has led the U.S. in scoring in 3 tournaments, and now he's really getting close to Landon Donovan's record. And I think
he'll break it with 7 goals against St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think what he's been able to do is remarkable, and the fact that he's still so important to his team at a more advanced age
God,
now.
I would have, by the way, sidebar, would have loved to be a fly on the wall in that Donovan Klinsmann pregame quote, "We met for a few hours." Are you kidding me?
That's what they said. A few
Yeah.
hours.
I think that's what Landon said.
That's what Landon
Yeah.
said. They cleared the air, and blah, blah, blah. But I just would have loved to hear that conversation.
Wow. Okay.
If anyone listening works for the NSA and knows how to get the phone records of Landon Donovan, I'm sure it was recording, right? Yeah.
Obviously, yeah.
Yeah, the Dempsey conversation is an interesting one. I think the big advantage Landon has over him is playing a huge part in what was the best run by a U.S. team at the World Cup, I think, in history. They did finish 3rd in 1930. There weren't many teams in that tournament. That only meant getting out of the group stage. But
You're talking about 02.
yeah, the 2002 World
Yeah.
Cup, when the U.S. advanced to the quarterfinals, I think is the best run the U.S. has ever gone at in the World Cup. And it was largely sparked by like a 19, 20-year-old Landon Donovan.
I mean, they went up 3-0 on a team that was sort of a dark horse to win the tournament.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Dempsey has had some big games in World Cups, scored a lot of goals in World Cups, but I don't know if he has kind of the signature run that Landon had in that tournament.
Counterpoint, Dempsey's huge advantage is he had a very successful international career, played in England for years. I mean, I think that's worth something, at least to the soccer snobs
Yeah, I mean,
in the audience.
Well, Landon Donovan was Everton's Player of the Month like 2 times. So
I don't know if you're expanding the debate to club.
People take those things into account. Just
Right,
saying,
right.
you know
No,
what I mean?
yeah.
Look, I think if Dempsey gets the record, which he will, barring some career-ending injury or something like that at this
he's
point.
6
now
goals.
that's out there in the
Well, there are a lot
universe.
of MLS defenders who are capable of doing that to him.
When's their next game against Kendall Waston?
Yeah, exactly. Just keep Aurelian Collin away from him completely. I think he'll go down as the greatest. I think it's a thing with Donovan where, it's like people say the same thing about MJ, where you have to take into account what he meant for the game as a whole and the country, his profile, off the court, off the pitch in this case. And I think it's tough. Like Donovan has more of the intangibles, obviously. Donovan's a soccer hero to a lot of people our age. You know what I mean? So
Also, not to make it overly statistic based, but I don't know what Dempsey's assist numbers are, but I'm guessing they pale in comparison to Donovan's. Donovan is the U.S. all-time leader in assists, like 57, 58. Like, I can't imagine Dempsey's anywhere near that. So, I mean, when you consider that as well, the completeness as a player that Donovan brought to the table compared to Dempsey, who really has been a great goal scorer, but not necessarily the guy who's going to set up a ton of goals.
I mean, let's just go tiebreaker will be the water fountain picture versus the picture of Dempsey shirtless holding up a largemouth bass. You know.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. It's the water fountain picture is the correct answer.
That is the more iconic
Yeah,
one, yes.
yeah.
All right, it's decided.
Do you know that I've drank out of that water fountain? It's in Cary, North Carolina. On one of these road trips I was on, I specifically made a detour and found that water fountain. So,
How did you find it?
who helped me with that? I feel bad that I can't remember, but it might have been Jeff Crandall, I think. Some journalist helped me locate that water fountain.
Did you reenact the picture? And
I
do you
tried,
have it available?
but I was like sort of like too embarrassed to get like a passing by child to
Oh,
be
yeah.
like, can you do this? But it needs to be like seductive, and my mouth needs to be just slightly
Needs to be
agape.
from this exact angle. Yeah.
Exactly.
The
And I was also just way too embarrassed to like set up a tripod and use a remote shutter release. You know, like can't do that. I mean,
the lesson learned from this is that if you are ever planning on visiting that park in Cary, North Carolina, go with someone else.
yeah, or like at night when there's no one there.
I feel like if
know?
you had pulled out your phone and showed them a picture of the Donovan one, you maybe could have sold it to a stranger.
Right.
Yeah.
or freak them out even more. Anyways, you want to talk about Jurgen Klinsmann?
Yeah, we got about 10 minutes. So Pablo,
Oh, we got a lot more than 10 minutes for this.
Yeah, well, Pablo yesterday tweeted out a sort of counterpoint to any Klinsmann fanboys who may have been encouraged by the U.S. making it to the semifinals of this last Copa America.
I'm gonna rifle through this really quick because the cons are easy here. These are all just statistics. In regard to Klinsmann's tenure with the U.S. national team, first 3-game home losing streak since '97, first 4-game home winless streak since against CONCACAF opponents since LBJ was president. He failed to qualify for the Confed Cup, which he's been listing as a top priority. Both of his handpicked coaches have missed back-to-back Olympics. That hasn't happened in 50 years. Failed to beat a top 10 team in 6 tries in meaningful competitions. Worst points per game versus top 20 teams of any U.S. coach since Bob Gansler. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? First loss to Jamaica ever in 2012. First loss at home to Jamaica in 2015. That loss against Guatemala, which is just like one of the most embarrassing moments in U.S. soccer history. They hadn't lost them since the Reagan administration. And this is my favorite stat, and I think Thomas actually pointed this out during the game. 2 players went 90 minutes for Guatemala who are in MLS and had not even gotten into one game for 1 minute during that year.
Right, yeah. Moises Hernandez and I forget who the other one was.
yeah, but the ones that
yeah.
played, they play for teams who are way worse than MLS teams.
Here's
Right.
One of the most damning stats. 2014 featured both the lowest possession percentage and the fewest shots per game of any U.S. World Cup team for which stats exist. That includes the '94 team, which was just out there basically trying to survive.
Yeah.
And
to counteract the group of death argument, a lot of that was just a game against Ghana, a team that the U.S. should and did beat, to their credit, but it wasn't
Right.
the prettiest game.
Okay, so there are a number of those stats. I think we've just rifled through a bunch of them. So there's also a counterpoint to this debate, and there are a number of stats that are more in Klinsmann's favor. Pablo, I think you're pulling those up.
I'm going to tweet them out.
Pablo's gonna tweet them out.
You can rattle some of them off.
I mean, off the top of my head, they.
I emailed them to you.
It was emailed, Seth.
Yes. Oh, that's right.
Get your shit together, Seth.
Let's see. Klinsmann. Yes, here we go. Off the top of my head, Klinsmann now has a career total of 52 wins, 25 losses, 17 draws. I believe that makes him the best winning percentage in official competition of any coach in national team history.
I'm going to tweet this entire list out right
Yeah.
now. There you go.
A lot of them are friendlies. But let's see. The national team posted a 9-game unbeaten streak in 2015, the second longest unbeaten run under Klinsmann.
And it was an 8-0-1 run, so not like a 4-0.
I mean, it will just rattle off quickly the friendly results: victory over Germany, victory at Azteca. Obviously they beat Italy for the first time.
Netherlands.
Yeah, they won in Jamaica for the first time ever in World Cup qualifying, which
beat Puerto Rico for the first time ever.
Those are all in friendly competitions, obviously, but they still count for something, I guess.
Yeah, and then probably the best stretch that the U.S. has had under Klinsmann was the stretch leading into the 2014 World Cup. They won 13 straight games at home between June of 2013 and February of 2014. They won a 20-match unbeaten run on home soil, 17 wins, 3 losses, 12-game winning streak in 2013, longest in U.S. history. So
who was their best player that year? Oh yeah, it's a guy who didn't even bring to the World Cup.
Eddie Johnson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean I think that was the height of the Klinsmann era so far. The way they pretty much swept through qualifying, clinched a berth with 2 games remaining, won the Gold Cup in very convincing fashion with a bunch of depth players, with a team that had Corey Ash and Jack McInerney and Will Bruin on it. But that said, I don't know if people are going to really remember a B team Gold Cup or the World Cup qualifying run when it comes to his overall legacy.
This is my prediction. All right, Klinsmann, I'm sure will. I'm fairly certain that the U.S. will qualify for the World Cup. Right? I mean, certainly anything is possible, but I think it'll be they'll either crash out on the group stage or get eliminated in the first knockout game. And I genuinely think that what most people will remember about Jurgen Klinsmann 10, 15 years from now, U.S. soccer fans, will be that he didn't bring Landon Donovan to the World Cup. I genuinely believe that.
I think that is his legacy, unless he makes like a run to the World Cup semifinals.
Who knows? He may have wanted it that way.
I'm not going to argue
but,
that.
I think that to any U.S. soccer fan, that's the first thing that comes to mind still. I mean, we've all moved on from it, but,
And he's still...
Wait, you guys have?
He's still... I saw in the post-game press conference after Argentina, he still mentions getting out of the quote-unquote group of death in the 2014 World Cup.
He does, yeah.
That is something that he is continuing to hold on to.
It's the one hot chick he dated. Just keeps bringing it up.
Yeah, and I also think, the last World Cup is probably the most polarizing aspect of the Klinsmann tenure, aside from, of course, leaving Donovan out. But, I think...
that's a part of it, yeah.
Of course. But, yeah, those who are in favor of Klinsmann, those who like Klinsmann, will point to that as, like, his big shining success. And those who are against Klinsmann will point to that as more of a failure than anything, just because they had a good chance to actually go further. They got outplayed in most of the World Cup. They could have lost by 7 goals in the round of 16 if it weren't for Howard.
You can make the argument that the group of death was not so much a group of death in execution.
Certainly, it wasn't.
Yeah, Ronaldo wasn't at his best. It was,
the Ghana team was in disarray that tournament. So on paper, it looked to be more of a group of death than it actually turned out to be. And then, of course, the one game against a team that actually was strong, the U.S. got completely outplayed, and were lucky to lose by a single goal. And then, of course, got even more outplayed in their knockout round game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does anybody at this table, do both of you feel like Jurgen Klinsmann should still have his job? I mean, just asking for your opinion at this point.
I don't like to. I don't know. To me, in general, it's tough to weigh in on whether someone deserves to have their job or not. I really would have to think about it to formulate.
Let me rephrase.
Let me say this:
Is there? Should U.S. soccer have found a better option at this point?
I mean, I think there's an argument to be made that after the Gold Cup last summer and the Confederations Cup playoff, that if there was a time to make a change, that would have been it. Similar to the way that Klinsmann was brought in. Bob Bradley was expected to stay through a second World Cup cycle. It got off to a bad start, and they pulled the trigger. So that said, should they have made the change? I mean, yeah, that's a tough call.
I'll say this. I think that if Klinsmann did not have the contract extension that he does, and if this were a different country, perhaps that is a little less lenient on their coaches, I think he would have been fired.
I think there's absolutely no doubt that if he was, at the helm of a European club or something like that, he would not have survived the to me, the Gold Cup was just like it was embarrassing. Even the loss in the third place game, the entire experience was embarrassing.
Yeah, the specific thing about the Gold Cup was, the usage of a couple players who clearly were not at the level needed to play on the national team.
Yeah,
and then for him to sort of retroactively say, all right, that Gold Cup was a learning experience. Like, yes, there were growing pains for John Brooks and Ventura Alvarado, but
it's been like like 6 years, man.
Right.
I mean,
I also think that other countries might have just let go of him after they lost to Guatemala. Like,
it's a learning experience for Ventura. He has to learn how to play soccer.
Goodbye. Even though it was in the middle of a qualifying group, and even though they had another game 4 days later, I think there are some countries that would have been like that.
I think we can all be very, very proud of this team.
And also, I will say something he has done in the media that I don't think would really fly in other countries. Yeah, there's a certain lack of accountability, I think. After games, he never really acknowledges that he, may or may not have failed to prepare a team.
A lot has to do with the quality of your players.
Exactly. He won't acknowledge making the wrong lineup choices, even after this Argentina game.
Well, to be honest, I don't have a preferred system.
Even after this Argentina game where, they're playing one of the best teams in the world, and he subs out Chris Wondolowski at halftime. Wando had a nightmare of a first half. That is pretty much an acknowledgement that he didn't make the right call there. He gets asked about post game, and he says, we made the right decisions. We kept the continuity, and then he goes into his spiel about how the U.S. players show Argentina too much respect, and that how they need to step on their toes more and be more aggressive. Okay, maybe that is a part of it. Watching the Copa America final, I did find myself thinking, wow, Chile has no fear of Argentina, and you can tell, but it also looked like the U.S. was tactically not as prepared as Argentina, and it looked like the personnel options he chose were not the right ones.
But I also think, what you're talking about, if he's saying they showed, they almost was like a deference for like, there was a reverence for like Messi, or they showed them too much respect. Well, you know what, man? I think a lot of, and you can talk to Ben Olsen about this, like, a lot of a coach's job in soccer is to instill a mentality. Mm-hmm. You can't just blame all that on the players. I'm not a soccer coach, but I just genuinely think that probably half your job is to be a motivational speaker.
Yeah,
so,
and I think this also continues a pattern, and I can't remember exactly which defeat this was in the recent past with Klinsmann, but he went into his press conference and said that his players needed to be meaner and nastier.
That's been a few games in his tenure.
We've heard this a lot. And what does that mean? And whose fault is that? And I think
maybe that's what Orozco was thinking.
Yeah, right. I think one thing, and we're sort of going off on a tangent here now. But I think a theme.
It's strange to tie us back to the 2002 World Cup, but look what Frankie Haydock did against Luis Figo. It's not like U.S. defenders, midfielders, aren't capable of... And, yeah, it was ugly, and he basically just trampled him the entire game.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's what you have to do.
Oh, my God. I had never thought of that. Frankie Haydock would be an absolute stalwart under Jurgen Klinsmann.
Yeah. He'd probably be, but he would probably actually be effective.
He'd probably still be starting. Like, if he came out of retirement, Frankie Haydock would start at right back against St. Vincent in September.
Yeah, I just think, it's been a constant theme, which I think is a little bit obnoxious through the good results and the bad results. where Klinsmann has just refused to ever take any sort of personal accountability for anything and is very quick to blame both players and the media for their lack of knowledge of what exactly it is he's trying to do.
Which is insane, though, although I think, and then it's funny because I think fans, and in a weird way, Klinsmann himself suggests that the media who covers the team doesn't hold players or him accountable enough. It really, all I read is like the media holding Klinsmann accountable, the media criticizing
and then
players.
There's a contrasting message, and then maybe he's just referring to different segments of the media.
Did you say Jason Whitlock, Colin Cowherd thing?
Right. Yeah. Maybe
where he said, why aren't people going after Michael Bradley? Are you fucking kidding me? Michael Bradley, people have been going after Michael Bradley. They called him like the coach's son for years.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, we remember after the last World Cup
Yeah.
where every single person who didn't watch that much soccer was like, Bradley's the worst player on the team. And then everybody like us was trying to be a little more nuanced about it.
Anyways.
Yeah. But, it's an interesting debate for sure. And I think that on the field, his legacy is certainly mixed, but certainly off the field, there are more questions about how he's dealt with the media and certain players.
He is the only coach to ever have been nominated for FIFA Coach of the Year.
That is true.
Correct.
Yeah. Although Barack Obama once won the Nobel Peace Prize, so...
Yeah, 6 months
For the
into
record, those are
Exactly.
comparable awards.
Completely. Exactly.
Yeah. Should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I guess that's it, right?
Think we got anything else?
Well,
No.
I was going to talk about FC Kansas City's use of Becky Sauerbrunn this season, but
Do you want to have the
did we
replay?
run out of time?
Sorry, we don't have time for Thomas's replay discussion again.
Oh, man.
Bye.